Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Anne. Good background, Anne. Actually, guys, we have a small group, at least right now. If everyone wanted to put on their video, I'd be open to that. This is the last one, and I think we've all shown that no one's gonna go nuts on us. No pressure if you don't want to, but it's always good to put names and faces. Hi, Patty. Oh, it's so good to see your face. You're muted though, so I can't hear you. All right. Okay. So Rashawn's on the call. He's not coming on video right now. That's totally okay. And feel free to maybe mute your mic just while I'm talking in case you get an alert on your phone or something. Then not everyone will hear it. But yeah. Okay. So as usual, I will let any stragglers in if they come in. But as of now, it looks like we've got a nice small little group today, which is kind of okay with me. I don't know about you guys, but I am a little bit tired. I think that, I don't know, it's just been a lot the last couple of weeks. And then I don't know, the eclipse and everything, since the solstice, the long days, it kind of just feels like my body never wants to go to sleep and wakes up really early. And then I'm always super tired. So today will be a little bit less structured than our previous classes. I want to talk a little bit about next steps, both for anyone here who's interested in more reading or more information. And I also want to share some of my favorite people who I am so thrilled to see are in this space, because there really are a lot of great people who are, one second, well, that's out, everyone. Hi, Kara. Kara, today, if you have any desire to put your video on, we're letting everybody show their face if they want. However, if you don't, no worries. Just to let you know. However, your mic is on. If you wouldn't mind turning that off for me for now, just so there's no background noise, that would be great. But Kara, I would really love to hear a little bit about your story later if you want to share. So anyway, what I was going to say was that there are some really wonderful individuals working in this space. And I find, though, that when we're suffering, when we are the patient, we kind of tend to look around and see a lot of the opposite of what we want. Like, you know, when I had to go through more than one psychiatrist and a few therapists before I realized, hey, maybe this isn't for me. But in retrospect, a lot of that may have been because I had a certain insurance that was only covering certain things. I had enough bad experiences in a short period of time that I just didn't bother to look for anybody else. And I created this narrative in my head that, you know, no psychiatrist wants to listen to me and all psychologists, you know, are unhelpful. And then I just kind of put this line down and moved forward in my life and kind of had this chip on my shoulder against the whole industry. And what I've found through the past couple of years is that while there are certainly people in the industry who believe that this is all biological and that you can throw a pill at it and I guess that'll fix it, there are so many people who don't. And there are so many people who are questioning this model. And there are so many people who are straight up rejecting it and saying that we need to get these people off. So my goal here is to at least share with you guys that there are people in this space who believe you. If that's your experience, they believe you. And if you don't want to be on drugs, they can at least show that there are other people out there who don't need this. So to start, I'm going to start with a quote. I'm also going to share a couple of the books that I've found to be very helpful and meaningful throughout my whole journey. So this one, actually, a lot of the quotes I've been reading you guys has been from a book called The Daily Stoic. And you can take notes if you want, but no worries. I have an epic PDF to send you guys after that I've been working on all week and I'm really excited about it. And it's going to have all my reading lists along with a few other recommendations. It's going to have links to organizations. It has everything about the 51% theory and calculating the day of your own death. It's like a little bit of everything we've been talking about. So don't worry, I'm going to be coming at you with that at the end of this session. Anyway, so Daily Stoic. This is by a man named Ryan Holiday, who has had, he started off as a marketer in New York City. He worked for American Apparel, and he wrote this book called Trust Me, I'm Lying, which pretty much blows open the notion of all media and just exposes how the current media model completely manipulates news, not necessarily because everyone is in it, who's in it is like trying to pull the wool over your eyes, but because the model is moving so fast that reporters aren't necessarily given the space and time they need to find or to develop really good work. And as a result, they pull from different lower and lower blogs and can change the whole industry. And there are people whose jobs it is literally to like be fake people on the internet and then talk to reporters. So anyway, this guy exposed the whole thing. Now he writes about stoicism, which is a pretty fun twist. But after all those years of being in the empty marketing machine, he decided to find some soul, and now he's been focusing on the Stoics. So the Daily Stoic every day has one quote and a little bit about the quote. I find it to be a really great way to start your day because it's short, as you can see here. This is one day, this is another day. So it's not a lot of commitment. And if you're anything like me, my attention span has been dog shit after a lifetime of social media. So I need to work on that. Anyway, so this is the quote for today. This is by Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. Stop wandering about. You aren't likely to read your own notebooks or ancient histories or the anthologies you've collected to enjoy in your old age. Get busy with life's purpose. Toss aside your empty hopes. Get active in your own rescue, if you care for yourself at all, and do it while you can. So the reason why I love this quote and really wanted to end our little sessions together with this is because there's a point at which we have to stop learning and stop taking in information and go use the information. And that's the scary part, right? It's very easy to sit in our own little bubble and do our own little private work and never really take it out into the world and put it to use. And that's kind of what I've been doing with this course I've run with you guys. I have had all this, information inside me, which I kind of thought was, not really that important. Like, why would anybody care about it? And I kept it to myself and I kept it small. And then I started to realize that, I don't know how many people it could help, but I have information and maybe people would like it. And so I had to kind of, pull up my bootstraps and actually put this together and come and talk to you guys, which I'm pretty nervous about. And I was quite nervous about it because I just didn't know how people would respond and if they would find it valuable. So it's the only way we learn. I've learned so much from this. And so that's what I want you to keep in mind. I've taught you guys these little tricks and skills. And yeah, last week I talked about the 51%, which is all about journaling and keeping notes. But at the end of the day, if we're not taking it out and using it, what's it all for? So let's keep that in mind. Moving on. So on that note, let's see, what should we go with next? I want to talk to you guys. First, I want to talk a little bit about some of the people in our space who I think are really important. We're just really important. So if you see me looking around a little bit, it's because I'm looking up at these people online. Okay, so speaking of books, I don't have a copy of this book right now because it is in another country and I have been stuck in quarantine in Canada and have not been able to get back and look at it. And so my favorite book on this subject, and the one that I think that everyone here should read, is Lost Connections by Johann Hari. That last name is H-A-R-E, H-A-R-I. And the book is Lost Connections, Unexpected Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Ways We, that's not the title. Hold on one second. Lost Connections, Uncovering the Real Causes of Depressions and the Unexpected Solutions. Those subtitles just get you. Rashawn, welcome back. If you want to take yourself on video, we can see your beautiful face. You're welcome to, but no pressure. Anyway, so Lost Connections, the reason why this book is so important is because it's the first truly mainstream book that has come up where we're really challenging our notion of the common, it's called the biopsychosocial model of depression. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about that. So biopsychosocial model, what this means is that traditionally psychiatry was built on the idea that mental health was a combination of biological. So that's the chemicals going through our brains. That's our brain itself. That's what happens if you get hit on the head because you're a football player and things are a little funky afterwards. Biological. Everything there is biological. Then there's the biopsychosocial model. Then there's the psychological model, which is your it's your state of mind. It has to do a lot with interactions, as like with yourself, kind of how you personally view yourself. And then there's also the social model, which is again nature versus nurture, how you were raised, what your environment is. And in theory, psychiatry was based on the idea that all three of these things came together in order to create people's mental health. So when you went to a psychiatrist, the question was not necessarily, oh, what's wrong with your brain, as much as the question might be, what's wrong with your life? So that's where we see if someone recently lost a spouse and they were grieving, and even if it had been years since they lost a spouse, the psychiatrist might say, well, something happened in your life. So that's what happened. So we're going to treat that. We're going to give you tools to treat that. What has happened over the past about 20 years is that we have transitioned into a purely biological diagnosis system. And it's not, it's not exclusive. Not every psychiatrist everywhere is operating purely on the biological system, but it has become very, very prominent, in part because of pharmaceutical companies and the fact that we make a lot of money from this. It's just become a model, and it's a business model, and it's political. Like there's just no two ways about it. That's why these two things have gone together. It's a lot easier to advertise for a pill on TV and say, you're broken, take this, than it is to say, well, sorry, you're grieving, or you can't pay your bills, or all these other things we can't fix. So there's nothing, no way for us to make money from that, and there's no pill for it. So come see us, and don't have health insurance. What can we do, right? Like, it's so much more straightforward to just say, you're broken, here's something to fix it. And so the biological model has kind of risen up, and it's become the noisiest aspect of psychiatry. Now, of course, what happens, and this is a big reason why I have hope, is because we've been doing this for about 20 years or so, and probably a little bit more than 20 years, probably close to like 30. But we've been doing it long enough now to start to see the consequences of what happens when we have a biological forward model. And Lost Connections, the biggest question he asked, and this is what sent him on his journey. Johann Hari is a writer. He's a journalist. He wrote for Guardian. He's also wrote a book called Chasing the Scream about addiction. And now he's actually writing a book about Las Vegas. I don't know what the details are, but he and I had a talk a couple months ago. And so he's a journalist first, but this book is very important. So his question as a journalist was, if more people than ever are on antidepressants, why are suicide rates still going up? That to him said something very straightforward, like, what? There's something wrong here. This isn't working. If it was working, people wouldn't still be committing suicide at even higher rates. So that led him down a long journey of, that led him down a long journey of asking, why we're depressed and the different reasons why, or different ways we can fix it. And if you read this stuff, it's not necessarily like, you know, it's not completely mind-blowing. It's like he talks about about how, you know, loneliness obviously causes depression, economic factors, psychological factors, hardship, trauma, lack of fulfillment, absence of status, and the disconnection of nature. And so when we look at all these things, like, to me, I was reading it and it made perfect sense. Like, yes, if you have no fulfillment over time, that's going to start to bring on depression. And then, of course, we look at our society and kind of say, well, how do we do that within our society that doesn't really allow us to maybe be fulfilled in the way we want to, or maybe we don't know how to be fulfilled. And so, like I said, this is one of the most important books, I think, because it was really the first one that kind of came onto the scene. It's an international bestseller. It's actually gone back on the international bestseller list since COVID hit because, you know, people are depressed because of course they are. COVID's a bitch. And so it really kind of broke this open in a way that I had never seen before. He was the first one to talk about antidepressant withdrawal in the major mainstream media as well, because he had experienced it himself. And so he had spent, I think, 14 years on, I believe it was Paxil. It may have been Lexapro, I don't remember, but he was on one of them. And he had a hell of a time getting off of them. And he's looking around and, you know, like any of us who are here right now, he kind of said, basically, what the fuck? Like, why is this happening? And so I highly recommend that. If nothing else, it'll make you feel less alone and it'll help you think a little bit more about why. It'll give you some history on why things happened in the way that they happened. It doesn't, you know, it's still shitty ultimately. At the end of the day, it's like, so money, but at least I like to know like the how and why of things. It makes me feel a little bit more like I'm in control. So Johann Hari, Lost Connections. Number one recommendation, if you take anything out of this course, is to go read that book. Let's see. I also want to talk a little bit about a handful of psychiatrists who are challenging the notion of a biological model only practice, because they're calling out the industry for being way too dependent on this and basically saying we're overprescribing, it's hurting people. And it's really good to hear that when you're trying to just scream into the streets like, I don't need to be on this medication, or this isn't working for me, why is this my only option? And so the reason why I list these three people, again, their names and information will be in my PDF, is because they're psychiatrists, they're not psychologists. And this is so important because psychiatrists' primary job, they're doctors. They had to go to med school and specialize. They are a doctor just like an orthopedic surgeon is a doctor. They're the only ones who can prescribe these medications. Psychologists can't do that. And so in theory, their only job is to provide psychiatric medicine for patients. Oh my God, I'm getting a political call in the middle of this. Sorry guys. Spam call in the middle of my thing. Stupid. Anyway, so psychiatrists, again, their only incentive is effectively to prescribe drugs, but there are people out there who are saying, no, this is not the right case, or this is not the right call. So there are three in particular. I'm really only going to talk about one because I've had a few conversations with him and I really want to bring up his work. The first one is Dr. Peter Breggin. He's been called the compassionate psychiatrist, and he specifically is calling for a big overview of how we prescribe drugs. And he's basically the father of this kind of critical psychiatry practice. He's been the one who provided the foundation for the modern criticism of psychiatric drugs and diagnosis, and he's moving the movement forward for caring and effective therapies that are not necessarily drug-based. He wrote a book called Taking Back Prozac. Let's see, he also has Toxic Psychiatry, Medication Madness, and Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal, a Guide for prescribers, therapists, patients, and their families. And then his most recent book is Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Understanding and Overcoming Negative Emotions. And this guy's a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, okay? So that is the powerhouse that we have on our side. The next one I want to talk about is Joanna Moncrief. You know, I'm not going to talk too much about her. I haven't spoken with her personally, but she's a critical psychiatrist. So she's just a psychiatrist walking around literally criticizing the way we do things in this modern world. And I just think that's so important because right now we're really starting to see, I think, like all across in almost all industries of the world, it's to me, it feels very difficult to kind of stand up and be who you are and believe in what you're going to believe in and challenge the modern way that the system does things. And the fact that we have some psychiatrists who are willing to stand up and write articles that are saying, like, we cannot continue to do this, it's harmful, is putting their careers at risk. And Joanna Moncrief is one of the women who has been doing that. And so far, like, I can't imagine the number of like crap she has to deal with because she's standing up and saying this, but she's doing the work for all of us that we can't necessarily do ourselves. The next one, this is Dr. Giovanni Fava, who is fabulously Italian. He's in Bologna in Italy right now at the University of Bologna. I have been honored to have a few conversations with him, and he is just like, he's the most quintessentially Italian man you can ever imagine. Like, imagine he kind of looks like Einstein, but more Italian, but like same hair. And he has a really heavy Italian accent, but he has been basically the father of the warning bells for antidepressants since the 70s. So he has been researching antidepressants and their negative effects since the 70s. He has been, like I said, he's the canary in the coal mine. So he's been talking about this, and now other people are starting to come around, and he's basically shrugging his shoulders, saying, "I told you so." So he is completely. He's not antidepressants. He says he will use them in some cases, but that for the most part they are so widely overprescribed, and that they are completely stopping people from processing their emotions and their traumas. And he's doing research on this, and the research is big and it matters. He's also the editor of a psychiatric journal, which means other people submit research information to him, and he evaluates it for his journal and then publishes it. So, you know, this is the man who said to me that it takes 5 minutes to prescribe an antidepressant and it can take years to get off of them. Like, that's a psychiatrist, a working psychiatrist. And to hear, again, a professional say that to me was just so validating, to know that there's other people out there who understand and are fighting for this. So Giovanni Fava, he's been such a great supporter for me. I interviewed him for my Washington Post piece, and then I interviewed him for another piece that I have yet to get published because publishing like blew up over the past 2 months. So that may never get out there, but I got to have a conversation with him, which was pretty like. So yes, he's great. Let's see. There's also Jonathan Rottenberg over at the University of Florida. So he researches depression, but my favorite thing about Jonathan Rottenberg is he takes a completely different view of depression. So many people, when they go research depression, they ask, why does bad depression happen to good people? That's the question they ask, and then they go find out, like, what went wrong here, and they go off and they do their stuff. Hopefully they come back, and so far no one has found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But Jonathan Rothenberg asked a different question. He asked, why do oh God, excuse me guys, I'm having a hell of a time talking today. Jonathan Rothenberg asked, why do depressed people get better? And to me, that's such a huge paradigm shift. And the fact that he's the only one asking the question, why do people get better? Not why do people get sick? To me is insane that he's the only one, but I'm so glad he's asking it. And he has a nonprofit he started called Depression Army, which is trying to reframe some of the ways we think about depression. And overall, he's not someone who's going to say that, he'll probably still say that maybe it's a little bit chemical, or that, it can just kind of come on, but he's asking the better question, I think. And for that, I'm really appreciative of. Let's see. Next, we have, there's a psychologist in the UK that I've spent some time talking to called Lucy Johnson. I also, one thing before I continue, guys, so all of these people, they all have actually very different views on the subject, and a lot of them contradict one another. But my point is just that there's a lot of people working on various aspects of this problem. And, you know, I may not fully agree with all of them, and I don't fully disagree with all of them personally, but my point is just that there are a lot of people thinking differently about this. Lucy Johnson is one of them who's on a pretty, she's on a pretty extreme scale. She doesn't believe that mental illness exists at all. She believes that mental illness is purely, so it's not biological, as she says, it's more like psychosocial. It's purely a result of our life experiences and how they manifest in our world and how we're able to deal with them. And she would even say that about schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, the more extreme mental illnesses. She straight up does not believe that there's anything wrong with our brains at all, and that all the labels in the entire industry is effectively just a farce. And this is a practicing psychologist. Again, tons of different kinds of people that we can look to and see how they're reframing this idea. Dr. Gabor Mate is another beautiful, beautiful soul. So he doesn't work at all in antidepressants or depression, actually. He works with addiction. But the reason why I included him on this list is because he asked the question, and I think it's completely relevant to all of us. You know, when he sees someone who's addicted, he doesn't ask what the problem is. He doesn't ask what is wrong with the person. He asks what happened to them. Where is the pain? Why is the pain? And I think that question, ultimately, for me personally, I think that that's what we need to be asking anytime we're talking about any kind of mental illness, diagnosable or otherwise, is why the pain? Where is the trauma? Where did this start? Because it's the manifestation. It's the outward manifestation of something that has happened to us. And to have someone like him asking these big questions when it comes to addiction directly parallels the fight for non-medicated mental health issues. There is a PhD student. This guy, he's adorable. His name is Mark Horowitz. He's at the University of Los Angeles, UCLA. And he's specifically studying, he's a psychiatry student, specifically studying safe deprescribing. This is a student. Like, we haven't had anyone who's doing research on safe deprescribing until now. But they're there, they're coming. So Mark Horowitz, keep on doing your good work. There's also Michael P. Heingardner, who's a researcher based out of Zurich, and he's pretty active on Twitter. I highly recommend following him because he's been calling out all the models, all the old models of depression research and antidepressant research, because you know he's a pretty young guy. He's probably in his 30s. And he's going back and looking through research because one of his favorite things to do is analyze old research and data and get real nerdy about it. And he basically noticed that all of the studies for antidepressant withdrawal or for depression relapse did not consider antidepressant withdrawal. So if you think about that for a second, we have all these studies about depression and relapse that say, you know, X amount of people relapse over this period of time. None of the studies included the antidepressant withdrawal in their actual studies. So that means, so that means that, I mean, like, I know, Patty, I've experienced antidepressant withdrawal. Some of you are here because you've experienced antidepressant withdrawal. Hi, Tara. And so I know that when I was going through withdrawal, I could have easily been diagnosed with something else because the things were going haywire. And what Heingardner is saying is that when we're studying people who are depressed and are relapsing, or people who get off their medication and relapse, we have to consider antidepressant withdrawal in this scenario. Because if we don't, we have no idea whether or not people are experiencing withdrawal symptoms or if they're actually relapsing or if they've developed some new thing. And most of the studies completely ignore it. Now, this to me, I was shocked to hear that they had never actually considered this before, because in my mind, it was like studying alcoholism without considering delirium tremens. You know, delirium tremens are what happens when you go into alcohol withdrawal. And that's a huge part of alcohol withdrawal. I mean, why people go to rehab clinics is they can detox safely. And so to not consider this to me is absolutely baffling, but it just hasn't happened. Like, the research effectively needs to be thrown out and start over. And Heingardner is the one who's really calling for action here. And so he's fabulous. I mean, like, he just has my whole little heart over here for the work that he's doing. Let's see, there's also Robert Whitaker. He's the author of a book called, let's see, he's the author of Anatomy of an Epidemic, and he's also the editor-in-chief of Mad in America, which is a website all about patient safety in psychiatry. Effectively, it questions a lot of the psychiatric models. It's all serious science-based research. It has whole hordes of psychiatrists and psychologists who will come and write for them. And it's pretty much the premier place to find any information on this that is, you know, quote unquote, against the psychiatric industry. Like, I really don't want to paint black and white lines in the sand. I don't think that's a healthy thing to do, but we need to be challenging it. And so that website challenges the modern conventional model through research and through doctors themselves who are questioning it. There's also Laura Delano over at the Inner Compass Initiative. For those of you who are really in the middle of withdrawal, like, it's one of the websites I always send people to. This is a nonprofit that is helping people unlearn everything they know about psychiatry and psychology and the SDA and drugs, and also provides a lot of resources for people in withdrawal. Laura's story is very similar to mine. She was on her drugs for a very long time. She also, I mean, her story was even more extreme than mine. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I think she was inpatient for a while, and then she got off all these drugs, and this has been her life ever since, is to help people understand that, you know, this compounding of drugs is not necessarily helpful, and that she probably was never bipolar in the first place. So her website is entirely devoted to that. And then the last one that I wrote down is Irving Kirsch. He's a Harvard researcher, and he's a psychologist. And he's a psychologist at Harvard. And the reason why he's fascinating is because he studies the placebo effect. And he has been obsessed with the placebo effect since he was young. And, you know, he used to be fully on the antidepressant train. And now he started looking at the research, and he realized that effectively what's happening is that when we're seeing advertisements for all these drugs, or, you know, whenever we hear these things like X amount of people in one study, you know, their depression went away or whatever it is, we're only seeing a very small snippet of the research that's been done. And because not all the research is required to be public. We can get all the research if we want. It's available via the Freedom of Information Act. And so that's what he went and he did. So he went out and he gathered all the research on antidepressants that's been done up until recently. And what he found was, when he actually went and analyzed the research, is that placebos either outperformed or did exactly as well as antidepressants in almost all situations. And because he's obsessed with the placebo effect, this obviously really stuck out to him. So his hypothesis is effectively that people feel better on antidepressants because of the placebo effect, not because of the actual chemical properties of them. Now, if you talk to Dr. Giovanni Fava about this, he's going to disagree. These two don't see eye to eye, and yet I still think that they're very much on the side of finding what is best for patients. And so that's why I support both of them, and I'm happy to have both of them also support my work as well. Let's see. Yes, okay, so those are 10 people, guys. I mean, this is not an exhaustive list. There are plenty more out there who are doing great things. And so you know, again, I come back to the idea of this third talk, which is why I have hope. And a big reason is because a lot of these people I've been lucky to talk on the phone with. And much of what I've said has kind of just been like, I don't know if this is something I should be talking about, or, you know, basically hemming and hawing about my own experience and whether or not it has any value. And these people who are really important have told me to keep doing the work, and that my story and the kind of work I'm doing matters. And they have continued to reinforce that social support and groups like similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't really have them for antidepressant withdrawal, but support groups like that are key for this community, but we don't have it. So I'm not sure what that looks like for me personally and how I'm going to move that forward. But the point is just that the more we talk about our stories, the more we open up and share what's happened to us with other people, the more we all start to connect, and the more we start to realize we're a lot less alone. And more importantly, the more the people in charge start to realize they can't get away with this anymore. And I think that's what's really important, is that you kind of have to pay with your dollar a little bit, right? Like, if we're not buying a whole bunch of drugs, we're not going to be advertising them to us in the same way. And that's obviously a very, very big goal that, 5 little people here can't really do much to change, but we can all start, reaching inside ourselves and doing our own work. So it becomes less of a story that we need in our lives. So I'll share 2 more books with you guys before I open up the floor a little bit. This is so weird to just talk like to myself and to some faces for a while. It just feels like you just heard yourself too much. And I want to hear about you guys, but you're here to hear me. It's weird. All right, another great book, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolynn. So much of my belief is that our mental health issues, if that's what you want to call it, do not stem from this idea that society just 20 years ago, when all these mental health diagnoses started popping up, we didn't all just suddenly break. It's not like human biology evolved to a point over the past 20 years where there's a lot more people with broken brains. That's not what happened. We don't evolve that fast. We're freaking dinosaurs effectively. We're slow. So this book really addresses a lot of that, because I think that what's going on here is that we have all these inherited family traumas, and that we have social traumas, collective traumas, and we absorb that in a way, and then it comes out in our own bodies. So Mark Wolynn asked the same question. He tells a little bit of his story. He was a complete, sort of atheist skeptic about everything. And then he had an experience where he started to learn that his issues were similar to his family members. And he's realizing that there's a connection between the traumas that his parents experienced and his grandparents experienced and what he's experiencing. And so he went out and got a counseling. He went out and got a whole counseling degree. I mean, he changed his whole life for this, and then started working with people. And what he's realizing is that people's issues, if they look back in their family history, there are family members who have already experienced those exact same issues. A good example is he talks about one woman who had a huge she had huge claustrophobia, and she was having panic attacks and couldn't figure out why this claustrophobia came on suddenly. And when they started going back through their history, they realized that her grandmother was part of, died in the Holocaust, and that, if you think of the claustrophobia that she must have felt in one of those camps, stuffed in, and they were at the exact same age when the woman was killed, the grandmother was killed, and the woman started having her panic attacks. They realized that trauma was passed down. And the reason why our traumas are passed down is, and primarily they go to the mother, is because if you think about it, when my mom was born, the egg that would become me was in my mother already. And the egg that would become my mother was in my grandmother when my grandmother was born. And so we actually have these the theory is that we have this, like, that our DNA is already encoded when we're born with the traumas of our parents. And they've started to study this in rats, and they're seeing that it takes 3 generations for things to work out. So that's yourself, your mother, and your grandmother. And then it kind of seems to peter out a little bit. So I think that's a completely fascinating concept that makes so much sense to me. This book kind of walks you through how to go back and look at your family history and connect the dots between your own issues and what happened to your family members, even if they're not alive, doesn't matter. I've worked a lot with my father emotionally on this one, and also my grandmother, who I was not close to at all, but who I have a frustrating amount of parallels with. And so to me, what this book did is it helps you forgive yourself a lot, because you start to realize that maybe it's not all my crap, and that some of this is just crap I was born with, and that everybody has that crap. And so we can learn to let it go. Which leads me to The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. So this book is a bit older than Mark Wolyn's book. It didn't start with you, but The Biology of Belief is one of the first big books on epigenetics, before epigenetics became a big fancy word that we're starting to hear a bit about. So epigenetics is the same idea that what happened to our ancestors can actually get encoded in our DNA, and it can flip off and on based on what happens in our lives. So a great example of that is if you have a set of identical twins and one develops breast cancer and the other one doesn't. Both twins are coded the exact same way in their DNA, and so in theory you would think that they would both get it or they both wouldn't, but that's not what happens. One or the other might get it. And the theory is that because of the individual experiences that each of these twins have, that it can trip the gene on or off. So, you know, if one has a lot of stress with the mother and the other one doesn't, they're kind of saying it's more likely that one who has a lot of maternal stress might have that breast cancer gene flip on or off. There's also been a lot of studies done, there's one big study that was done about trauma being passed down. And again, it was with Holocaust victims. They studied the descendants of Holocaust victims and found that they are marked differently, and that they have a higher likelihood of developing some sort of trauma or mental health issue than non-descendants from people, or people who were not descended from the Holocaust. But the good news is, again, it's not a sentence. This is not saying that, you know, if there's been trauma in your family's past, that you're guaranteed to get it. This book will talk about how you can change your mindset and change your life in order to make it less likely that those things will happen. And so it's all really connected, and this is really a lot of the work that I believe, which I haven't gone too much into it here, but it's just that, you know, like, I think that there's a lot more going on than just that our brains are short-circuited. I think that these are deep societal and social issues that are manifesting in us, and mental illness, and even more importantly, the desire to recover from one, is our call to action. It's saying, like, we're not going to put up with this crap anymore, and we are going to heal not only our own shit, but our family and collective shit too. And that's why it's the hardest work we do. But what's also why I think it's the most important work that we do, because we can have it stop with us. So that's what I got for you today. We've got about 15 minutes left. First things first, if there are any questions that anyone is dying to ask me before I turn it over to you guys, please, you can unmute yourself, ask the question, or type it in the chat box. Otherwise, if no one has any questions, I would love to hear a little bit of Kara's story, because we haven't heard from her yet. But I see her face, so I'm assuming she's open to it, but if not, no problem. So anyway, I will give you all a moment or two to type any questions you have. Let's see, what's Patty say? There are people like us who take an internalized crap and they're narcissists, like their bio on theirs. Yeah, and you know, I imagine, Patty, that you probably maybe feel a little bit like a magnet, narcissist magnet, because yeah, and it's you know, because we equal and opposite reactions, right? So it does not surprise me that like when you feel very hurt and you're so deeply internalizing that it seems like there's so much more out there that you're attracting. But the more work you do on the inside and heal, the less that's going to be attracted to you, because it's almost like it's not it's like that's what they want, right? They want the person who they know they can get to. If you're covered in Teflon because you've been doing all the good work for yourself, they're going to see that a mile away and move on. So that's why we have to start with our own inner work first and help fix all the crap in there, so we're less attractive to the narcissist out there, and it bounces off us a little bit more. It is possible, I promise. Yep. And Rashawn is right too. Kind-hearted people tend to be magnets, yeah, because we really want to see the good in everyone. But there's the line. We also have to find our own boundaries, and I think that is big work. So we've got to put our own masks on, then work on everybody else. Okay. All right, Tara, are you ready to share? I know I'm putting.
I am. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can. And I
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna put myself on mute.
All right. I'm sorry I wasn't showing my face the whole time. I was actually at my grandparents, and I was having a conversation about my antidepressant withdrawal. So I thought that was okay. An okay reason for me to be a little late.
Absolutely.
So I apologize for that. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm a 30-year-old female. Been on antidepressants since I was 15. Last July, I started having kind of not unusual panic and anxiety, but anxiety and panic that I had not felt for a very long time. So the next step from the doctor would, of course, be to increase my antidepressant. I was on 225 milligrams of Effexor. So kind of got to a point where I'm like, is increasing my dose the correct thing to do? What would it look like not being on antidepressants? Because like I said, I had been on them since I was 15. I started counseling when I was 5 years old. So kind of been in that, the traditional mental health counseling and, medication at age 15 to 16. So anyway, I started my withdrawal journey last July. It's been very challenging. I am very, very sensitive to medications and even substances like caffeine. I'm just very sensitive. I cannot drink coffee. I actually used to consume Diet Pop. I don't know how I did that, but I stopped taking that. So anyway, the withdrawal has been, it's been a very slow process. In the beginning, I was told to drop my dose by 75 milligrams every week.
That is so much.
Yeah, it was. Well, first of all, so I was prescribed Effexor by my family doctor. And when I told her that I wanted to come off of the medication, she said that she was not comfortable managing that for me. Mm-hmm. So I went to kind of like an up and coming psychiatry practice in Buffalo, New York, which is where I'm at. And the woman that I saw actually wasn't even certified at the time. I mean, she was working under a doctor that was supervising her work, but she was very new to the industry. So, but the Effexor pamphlet does recommend 75 milligrams per week coming off of it, which is, I mean, absolutely insane. So I found another psychiatrist and ended up going back up to my original 225 dose and then coming down a little slower. So I'm currently at 150 milligrams, taking and then also taking out 15 beads from that. Mm-hmm. So I've equated a normal size bead to be around a milligram.
Mhm.
So I'm at 135 milligrams. One thing that I did want to ask you about,
Yeah.
Brooke, so I've been on a lot of different antidepressants, but one thing that I was reading was that it can be the withdrawal can be easier if you add in a second antidepressant.
Hmm.
So while I hated the idea of going on another
Hmm.
antidepressant, I did agree to start taking 20 milligrams of Prozac,
Prozac.
which I have been on before, it was actually what I was on prior to getting on Effexor. So
Hmm.
I don't remember any negative withdrawal symptoms from
Hmm.
that. Um, but I wanted to see if you had any experience of talking with people that did that and had success with it, if you think it's a good idea, or
Hmm.
any
Oh,
comments on that.
yeah. So obviously, I'm not a doctor, but my doctor did prescribe me Prozac when I was getting off the Effexor as well. Um, and she said that it is supposed to help. However, I didn't take it, and the reason
Okay.
was because I also I had, again, it was like a little bit of a conflict of interest for me, because I was like, I'm trying to get off them. Why do I want to get
Yeah.
on more? But beyond that is I had a timeline. And so because I started getting off the drugs in March, because I wanted them out of my system by the time I left the country, I was very uncomfortable with putting another drug into my system that I would then have to get off of, not knowing.
Yeah.
But that, I would say though, that the biggest reason why I didn't do it though is because my father had spent a lot of time, like years, on depression, and he didn't do well on it. So I had this kind of, kind of feeling that, like, if there is a genetic component here, I've seen this not work well for my, the only person that I have experience with. But he wasn't on anything else. He was put on Prozac in the 90s, back when that was really a popular thing to do. So that was the bigger reason for me. It was just the fear of not wanting to touch that because of what happened to him. However, it is a common practice. I've seen it happen a lot. Are you on the Surviving Antidepressants board?
No.
Okay. I put it in the PDF that I'll send you guys. I would really recommend searching around there a bit. So it's a nonprofit. It's called Surviving Antidepressants. It's There's going to be someone who's asked this question who will have more direct experience with not only your dose of Effexor, but the combining Prozac with it as well. I've been talking with the founder. Apparently they've been fairly overwhelmed with new signups lately, which oddly is another reason why I have hope. Like, I've been so on the one hand, I'm like, oh shit, but I'm also just like, game,
Yeah.
more people saying like, what's going on? But the bad news is that their team has been their team is scrappy, and so they've had to, when I checked about a week and a half ago, they had to temporarily shut down new memberships. But it's okay. You should still be able to get all the information. You just might not be able to register. But
Okay.
there's a ton of good stuff in there. They're going to have, you can search by the type of drug you're on. You can, just play around in there. It's almost like there's so much information. It can be a little hard to find, but it's worth spending some time. So you will find some information there too. One of the things that one of the pieces of research I read recently, and I don't remember who did this research, but it was talking about two things. One, there seems to be some correlation that some researchers are saying that it doesn't necessarily matter how long you taper, that the effects are probably going to be similar. But they specifically talk about that as like once you stop taking the drugs. So like that slow taper is definitely better, but once you stop taking them, there's kind of a similar, people still tend to experience the same things, which explains why I had similar symptoms at 37.5 milligrams as people who are on 300 had, because there's a point at which it seems like there's like a point of no return. But the other thing that was said, I mean, that's no reason to stop taking please don't stop taking your drugs cold turkey. Keep doing what you're doing. Just know that it's, that's kind of what they're starting to see a little bit. And then also the other thing that's particularly relevant to you is there seems to be a direct correlation with the length of time you are on these drugs and the length of time it takes to get off of them and the experience of getting off of them. And that would also explain why it was so hard for me, even though I wasn't on the super highest dosages. So knowing that, I think you really need to keep in mind that, I mean, 15 to 30 was the exact same age that I was on. And so I completely understand, like, you are a different person now than you were before. And I think it's really disorienting to have to go back and be like, what is normal? Because we don't know, right? Like, my normal at 14, what did that mean? I was in middle school.
Yeah.
And my father was alive, so the big trauma in my life hadn't even happened yet. So Dr. Giovanna Fabi was the one who said this to me, that he like really wishes more people understood that taking and getting off of antidepressants is a single path. You never go back. This is not a circle. We are not trying to go back to the person we were, because we're never going to get back there. We are on this journey to discover who we are now and use our experience and learn about ourselves again. And in some ways that's super frustrating, because like I felt like I lost a lot of years. Like, oh, if only I hadn't lost those 15 years, like how much better would my life be, right? But that's a completely futile question to ask yourself. But not only that, it's kind of beautiful in a way, because it's almost like, to me, it was like second puberty. Like, let's see what I like now. Like, what is this? This is all new. I mean, I'm an emotional disaster, but also like, I don't know, like things look different. They taste different. What do I like? What parts of my life work for me? What don't? Like, it really felt like it's huge opportunity to reevaluate everything you're doing and all your choices and say like, what works for me and what doesn't? Because I truly believe that the bottom line is if you change nothing, nothing's going to change. So
yeah,
that's your work. And then to keep following the path and the plan with your drugs and getting off all of them. I would recommend, if you're working with some sort of alternative therapist in addition to a traditional one, I find the combination can be really, really powerful, because just again, we want lots of boxes checked, not just the one.
Yeah. So I was I've been, like I said, I've been in secular counseling since I was 5 years old. I've had experience with a few biblical counselors. I was interested in looking up what you had gone through. I was trying to remember the name of it. Compassion Key, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But even, I mean, I definitely find a lot of value in just consulting many different therapists and coaches, and there's so many different programs out there. I mean, this stuff is being marketed like all the time. So it's really just finding what is right for you.
Yeah. Do you have a strong religious background?
So I grew up Catholic. I never like got confirmed, just because I felt like I was doing it to like conform to what my grandmother would want. So I did not do that, but I am a strong Christian.
Okay. There's a woman, her name is Dr. Mary Munta. And last time I was checked out her website, it was under construction. And it is still under construction, but that's okay. I'm gonna so let's see. I'm just gonna send you her Psychology Today link. It has her phone number in it. I think you should call her or email her if you have the availability, and just see what's I don't know, or just look into her. Unfortunately, her website is under construction, so you can't look there. But this is a woman. I'm going to send you her information. So she's a psychologist. She's also a Compassion Key practitioner. Okay. So she does both, which is a really good combination. And she's fascinating. She grew up in Western Africa and became a nun and was a nun for 20 years. And
wow.
then moved to the States and got a psychology degree. And now she's at a university in Ohio and works as a psychologist and works in compassion piece. So she just has a really interesting blend of history and practices and methods that might be a very good combination for you if you are looking for someone. So that's her Psychology Today profile.
Okay.
If you have any issues getting in touch with her, let me know. I can contact her and see if she's taking new clients or what the deal is. I think that the timing of this may be very good for you because COVID has forced a lot of these telehealth and counseling rules to be changed. So, it's possible to get the therapy you need now, especially more traditional therapy over the phone, where we couldn't do that before. So,
yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing. I mean, like you said, it's so important for all of us to share our stories and just get it out there, because I too was like, I don't want to tell people what's going on, but it's so important because there's so many people out there dealing with it that are feeling like that, like they don't want to share it. So that's what it takes for us to all come together, is just having that courage to do that. So thank you so much for all of your work.
You're welcome. I mean, thank you. How did you initially find me?
So I found you by literally Googling hope for coming off of a Fexer. I found your Washington Post article.
Yay!
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Google. I've been so happy to have you here, and I really hope that if nothing else, this all gives you a little bit of hope. And
yeah, no, you've been awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. So it is past 6, everyone. So I did want to let you guys all know, since you're in my little network, I have been consciously getting off of social media lately, and it's been lovely. So much time in my head without having to be on social media. But the big thing I did is I started a newsletter, and I would love it if you all wanted to subscribe to that if you haven't already. I'm going to drop it in the chat box. What I've found is that being on the newsletter is really allowing me to really talk about what I want to talk about and not feel the pressure of not only likes, but just trolls and shit. I'm really tired of creepy men telling me to send them pictures of my feet, and among other crappy things that happen to you when you're on the internet. So this allows me to really be able to connect with people who want it. And so I put the link in there. I wanted to answer Anne's question about religious work done in religious communities regarding passing wounds down through generations. So I have not done a lot of research on it personally. However, I also know that it is something that is talked about, especially it is something that's talked about. I don't really know the religious side of it at all, though. But I think anytime people are talking about generational wounding, it's a good thing. So anyway, I hope you all have a lovely Sunday. I will be sending you an email shortly with my epic PDF that you are welcome to share and do with what you want other than sell on the internet. And thank you all for being here with me. And you guys all have my information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, especially Kara and Patty. Just if you have any questions, let me know. But y'all are wonderful. Thank you for spending this time with me. Have a good Sunday.